Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Namaduhu wa nasalli ala Rasul kareem. Viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Here are some observations about Javed Jabar's documentary concerning how East Pakistan became Bangladesh. He has mentioned different causes for the breakup of Pakistan, which are no doubt true. In order to understand the tragedy of East Pakistan, one needs to know that nations are united by different factors. Some are united by race, some by language, some by region and common history, and some by pure economic interest. Pakistan came into existence in 1947 not because of common race, language, region, or economic interest. The only reason Pakistan came into existence was a common religion, namely Islam. Just consider what Bengalis, Punjabis, Sindhis, Pathans, Baloch, Kashmiris have in common. The obvious answer is Islam. This documentary does mention that the Muslims of India became Pakistan. That is why the country was separated by 1,000 miles of Indian territory. Bengali Muslims became part of East Pakistan, while Bengali Hindus became part of India. Punjabi Muslims became part of Pakistan, while Punjabi Hindus and Sikhs became part of India. It is therefore crystal clear that the only reason for Pakistan was Islam. It is very important to understand that Islam, unlike other religions, is a very different way of life. Other religions do not have a system that is rooted in the divine law like Islam. Other religions do not have a model where the state was based upon divine law simply because they do not have the divine scriptures intact like the Quran. Christianity never established a state, let alone an empire like Islam under the Sahaba, that is, the companions of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Christians established a state in Europe under the Pope, and they thought he was ruling under the divine law. However, they did not know that Jesus, Isa al-Islam, never established a state under the divine law like the one established by the Sahaba. In other words, for Muslims, the model government for all times to come is the period of the first four rightly guided caliphs, namely Abu Bakr, Siddiq, Raziyallahu anhu, Umar Raziyallahu anhu, Usman Raziyallahu anhu, and Ali Raziyallahu anhu. This is the normative period of Islam and will remain so till the end of times. When Pakistan was born in 1947, the people at the helm of affairs started looking at the Western models for an Islamic state. This was the first big mistake that they made. If Muslims were to live under a Western model, which they were already doing, then there was no need for Pakistan. Those Muslims were thinking like the Jews, who felt that there should be a separate state for the Jews. Like the Christians, the Jews did not have a detailed system like Islam. In other words, they do not have the divine law to guide them in matters of state. Israel is a Jewish state without the divine law. The Western educated Pakistanis made the same mistake, which brought disastrous consequences. Javed Jabar's documentary mentions that in March 1948, a few months after the creation of Pakistan, the Quaid-e-Azam announced that Urdu would be the national language. Just imagine if he had instead announced that Arabic, the language of the Quran, would be the national language. The Bengalis and the others would not have been upset. That would have made more sense because what united all these people was Islam, and Arabic being the language of the Quran would have been acceptable to all of the people. So this was the first divisive step that was taken by the government. Making language of the Quran the official language would have united the new nation. Since Islam was not the objective of the secular rulers of Pakistan, they kept making one mistake after another. The documentary mentions the injustices which were bound to happen under a secular system. The secular system is devoid of the high moral standards that Islam expects from the people. So this would lead to disaster sooner or later, and it did in the case of East Pakistan. Since Pakistanis have been so much impressed by the West, they adopted the Western democratic system of elections in Pakistan. The first free elections were held in December 1970, which was held on the principle of one man, one vote. That was another big mistake. Since the Bengalis had a majority, Mujibur Rahman secured 160 out of 300 National Assembly seats. Now he would have to be the Prime Minister, and Bhutto, who won in West Pakistan, would not accept it. Obviously, Bhutto and people like him were concerned that if Mujibur Rahman becomes the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he would do the same thing to West Pakistan what the West Pakistanis had been doing to the East Pakistanis. So it was completely unacceptable to Bhutto and his party for allowing Mujibur Rahman to be the Prime Minister. And of course, we all know how this led to an impasse, and finally the military had to start, the military started military action, and it led to the war, and finally the breakup of Pakistan. We know that if this was an Islamic system, this tragedy would have been avoided. In Islamic normative period, the rightly guided caliphs were not elected by popular vote. They were all selected on the basis of their high standards, of their high commitment to Islam. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, this has never been even discussed. The people are not elected because of their high moral standards. They are elected because of their other reasons. It could be their wealth, there could be connections, there could be family. We know that the people in power, like the PPP, is basically a family party. So started by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and then inherited by his daughter Benazir Bhutto, and then her son Bilawal Bhutto. So it's mainly a family. It's a dynasty. It's not really a political party. And same case with Nawaz Sharif. That's basically the Sharif family. So if it's not Nawaz Sharif, then it's brother Shahbaz Sharif or his daughter. So it's still very much the same old system. It's not based on their commitment to Islam or their high moral standards. It is how much what connections they have, how much wealth they have, how much they can manipulate the system, and how they can fool the system. So this is how Pakistan has been going on from the very beginning. So now we have a third party, that is Imran Khan's party, the PTI, and which again is based on the popularity of a single person. So this is how Pakistani politics develops and has developed over a period of time. That personalities, not the qualities, decide who gets into power. And this is a very big mistake. And until this is corrected, this tragedy, or these tragedies, will continue. And we have to understand that Pakistan has already lost half of its part, and the other parts that are still intact are also in a state of turmoil. The economy is a mess. There's a lesson to be learned from the experience in East Pakistan, that Pakistan has to come to terms and then make a decision to go to the Sharia, to go to Islam. And the people who are in power should consult with those who know what that system was, who are aware, who have the deep knowledge of that system, and how to bring that into effect. And this is a very important responsibility of the armed forces of Pakistan, to make sure that the people who come into power are those who are very well versed in Islam. It cannot be said about any of the leaders who belong to these three major parties, namely the Pakistan People's Party, the Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz, and the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Imran Khan's party. All these leaders in these parties do not have any idea how the Khulafa Rashidin carried out the state, carried out the affairs of the state. They have very little or no knowledge, and one cannot expect these people to deliver. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide the Pakistanis to the right path. Wa akhirat dawana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.